And so as real brand builders, and I know the folks who are listening to this are truly hold that at heart, we have incredible power at our disposal to bring truth and light and information and movement. We can move millions, hundreds of millions, billions of consumers forward. There are so many who are ready for this journey. And if we use our power, our collective voice, to bring truth and light, we will bring about positive change in this world. And that's what we can do as marketers.
Everyone, I want to say a proper welcome to John Replogle. John, I'm not trying to be nice when I say that over your career, you've been one of the marketers and then leaders that I have most respected the path of, because it follows my heart and philosophy. You started in what was many times known as the School of Marketing after Procter and Unilever had that reputation for so long. Diageo picked it up with its Dweep program and its way of marketing that Rob Malcolm so thoroughly put together. You came out of that school building huge brands like Johnny Walker and Smirnoff and taking a leadership role before moving to Unilever, where we were colleagues. And again, finding your way to the business, probably charging your way to the business. That was very purposeful, ultimately being a GM and being a big player in the whole launch of Dove Real Beauty globally. And then moving from there to become the CEO of another very purposeful company. You see a theme emerging, Burt, ultimately bringing that to a sale. And again, becoming the CEO at a company that I had the pleasure of meeting you at and learning from your work and seeing the incredible purposeful work at Seventh Generation, which you ultimately, and how ironic, how the world turns in circles, you sold to Unilever. And now you are in the next level of the role, one that the world needs, one of investors at One Better Ventures, one that invests in companies that are trying to do the right thing. I'm sorry, it's a little longer introduction than usual, John, but I'm so happy to have you here today because I think we can learn so much from you. Where are you and how are you?
Good morning, good evening to all our listeners as well. And thank you for having me, Mark. I'm doing well, thank you. I'm got a little cold, so apologize if I cough during the session, but I'm moving about right now. I'm in Boston Logan Airport on my way to DC to celebrate my daughter's graduation from graduate school today. So I'm very proud of her. She went to undergrad and then went into Peace Corps, and now she's got a master's in international education. She's one of the good ones. She's going to go out and make a positive difference in the world. So I'm proud to celebrate with her this weekend.
Well, thank you for making the time. I want to start with a question that I've asked almost every leader that comes into the Humanised Growth Series, which is about the last 2 years. It's out of respect, and it's also out of pure curiosity on how different people have seen the changes around us. What, for you, when you look back at the last 2 years, has been the biggest lesson?
Mark, I would say the biggest lesson and the theme, the key word that I'm working on is resilience. I think what COVID did and so many other forces are doing right now is they're undermining people's confidence and security in the things we believe in, count on every day. And so resilience is really perhaps one of the most important skills and muscles we can develop as individuals and as business leaders and within businesses as well. So I've been really practicing how to build resilience and coaching and developing that within the organizations I work with.
Can you unpack resilience for us?
Yeah, resilience is dealing with ambiguity. It is about learning to not only survive, but to thrive in the constant whitewater of change that we face every day. We've never lived in a human scale that moves at such a pace. And so we have to become more agile, more adept, more adaptive. We have to constantly understand what are the core principles and beliefs that ground us and they bring us back to home base. And we need to really define those sets of values for ourselves, our core purpose, if you will. And then, just both human and on organization scale, we have to demonstrate and practice self-care. And that for me is how resilience is grounded and built, both individually and within organizations.
Interesting, because I presented at a CMO roundtable in Brazil last week, and the last slide in the evaluation of how brands had reacted to COVID was the slide of the famous Dove campaign for celebrating the nurses. And the point being that the brands with clear purpose reacted almost immediately, whereas other brands took committee meetings and PR comms consideration. Have you seen any of that? What impressed you in how people reacted when COVID struck?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it. And you're absolutely right. That brands that know what they stand for and what their value sets are, they are the most agile. They're the most in the moment. And they can address real human needs in an authentic and truthful way. And I've seen that time and time again with some of the companies we work with. I'll give you a good example. Lisa Sleep is a mattress company we work with. About 70% of sales are online, but 30% were at retail. And overnight, that retail component of our sales disappeared. And so we said, well, what are we going to do? We're going to lose a tremendous amount of sales, and the world's in a really precarious place right now. And within 48 hours, we had designed a hospital bed system to meet the surging demand for hospital beds with a frame, a mattress, a pillow, the whole works. And we were able to provide those to Samaritan's Purse and other Centera, Virginia-based hospital system. We were shipping those systems within a week.
Wow.
That is a purpose-led organization that knows exactly how to respond and be of the moment. That's resiliency in action.
All those times that I heard the count of hospital beds, I never really thought about the hospital mattress. You've just made something very, very practical, very purposeful. But how do you, I want to just drill down on that resilience a little bit more, because you mentioned some components. And I spoke to a CMO yesterday that talked about personal resilience as the start of everything. Paul Pullman has made the point, personal purpose is the beginning of everything. How do you do that at scale if you're an organizational leader for your teams?
Well, as a leader, you have to be clear on your own purpose. And Mark, you really, in my bio, you defined kind of my career. My career pivoted at the moment I discovered my purpose, that I truly unpacked and began to live my purpose, which is to inspire positive change for people and planet. That's what I'm here for. I discovered that when I was 35 years old, and I've been on a different journey for the last 20 years since that point. So, know thyself is the foundational rule of awareness and knowledge and being able to lead. And so leaders need to really discover their purpose. And similarly, they need to do that exactly for the organization as well. So the great organizations today and tomorrow are really clear on their mission, their vision, and their values. And that's something that my partners and I, One Better, work with companies every day to reinforce, to instill and reinforce. So it's one thing to set that mission and vision and values, but then you have to build reinforcing systems that bring it to life on a constant basis, that align people to it, that create reward systems that motivate and ennoble the right behaviors. That's how you begin to do it at scale. It starts with a leader and a vision, leadership team, and it's the cascading effect throughout the organization of bringing people together and rallying them and aligning them against that set of values and putting the systems in place, be it recruiting systems, reward systems, feedback loops. All of those things are the essential elements of making sure that you create really an echo chamber focused around that core purpose.
Let's take it even a step further, because this is a real open question in my mind. What you've just described, I would suggest, is a lot about what in the old days we might have called brand stewardship or purpose stewardship. And it's creating that clarity for the company as a leader, and then making sure that everyone in the business truly understands that. But there's a second stream around having those people go through something. I had the former CEO of Best Buy, the chairman now, and he closed all his shops for a day, or maybe it was a morning, to have people on the shop floor have discussions around why they work. And this strikes me, having lived in America for 27 years, as so un-American still. You don't talk about your feelings at work. And on the other hand, post-COVID, things have really changed. Where do you see this going? And have you seen companies pick this up at scale?
Wow, there's so much here. Great companies do discuss their feelings at work. Companies are built on love. You have to put love at the heart. What I've always wanted to do is build love brands consumers adore, that they want to be part of a community in. And you can't build that without emotional resonance. And we are all brand builders, right? The brand doesn't reside in the marketing department. It's in the entire company. It's about creating congruence between the brand values and the values we live and work every single day. And brands stand on technical, functional, and emotional points of value to a consumer, right? And you have to have that emotional quotient. And so great leaders demonstrate and engender EQ within an organization and within a brand. And so you have to bring people together in an emotional connection. You have to build community. That's how you create enduring, resilient, sustainable businesses.
It strikes me as a massive opportunity. I spoke to someone yesterday that was thinking of moving into the space of, at scale, helping companies take the next step of bringing their leaders to really develop their marketing ikigai or their personal ikigai, where they find the interaction. It's a session in the IRG program, by the way, between what they love, what they're great at, what they get paid for, and what the world needs. That requires work, though, and you don't want everybody to figure that out. Well, you do want them to figure it out on their own, but it has to happen before it can come together. Look, if you look at the change that COVID has brought, you talked about resilience. If we talk about expectations of society, of citizens, what's changed?
I'll comment first on one thing you said, and then I'll come to your second question. And there's a great quote by Buckner who says that your calling is where your great strengths meet the world's great needs. Right? Your calling is where your great strengths meet the world's great needs. So discover your strengths, right? Understand what the needs of the world are. And that's where you find your calling or your purpose. And the world's never had more great needs. There are so many crises we face. There's existential threats to our human condition. COVID, makes clear that we are all one. We are all interconnected. What happens in one part of the world happens across the world. And there's a remarkable power in that, but there's a remarkable threat to that as well. We are only as great as the weakest among us. And so COVID has really led people to lose some trust and faith in the institutions we believe in. Certainly my perspective from the US, and I didn't travel abroad during COVID, but was that, we really saw a breakdown in the traditional organizations and institutions that we turn to for guidance and trust. And there's been an incredible factionalization Uh, and so what it means for us as leaders and businesses today is to restore trust. That's what we have to do. You look at the rise of cryptocurrency, for example, and that is a response to the loss of trust in things like our federal government. That's really why crypto is on the rise. It's the breakdown in trust. So we as leaders and brand builders need to build trust. That is our job. And I define a brand as a relationship between a consumer and a product and service. And relationships are all about trust. And so we need to be trust builders these days. That's the overarching mantra coming out of COVID.
So now, I know you're currently not a CEO, well, you are of an investment company, but you're one of these CEOs of companies coming out. Trust is dramatically important. But as so often, a crisis accelerates things that were budding beforehand. And as IRG, we very self-servingly, because we believe, and that's our purpose, we believe that the drive towards more humanized growth, multi-stakeholder growth, has been accelerated by COVID, by CEOs that already declared pre-COVID in the business roundtable that not just the shareholder, but all stakeholders were the people they wanted to create value for. What do you believe is true about that? How much has that sped up and become more important? Do you see it everywhere as an investor? Just give me your perspective from your place.
I do. I see it quite often, Mark, and I'm a big believer in that. I mentioned this notion of interdependence, and we are truly becoming more and more interdependent. I mean, look at the reverberations of the Russian invasion and the impact on Ukraine and what that's going to do to the food system. And 25% of the world's wheat comes out of Russia and Ukraine. 80% of all wheat in Egypt comes from that area, right? I mean, so the Egyptians are going to be, and the most vulnerable Egyptians are going to be absolutely devastated by this war. So we have to take a multi-stakeholder approach. We have to understand the second and third order implications of our actions. And so the negative effect is this ripple effect. The positive effect is that it leads to a mindset of collaboration. And so I think we're moving into a world, I call it the post-competitive world, a world where it used to be a win-lose, and now we strive for win-win, where competition was the overarching theme. And I think the best companies, the most sustainable and enduring businesses, will be those who know how to collaborate on a much greater level, who strike partnerships and who think across, the vastness of their stakeholder base, be it about their business partners, supply partners, their investors, their customers, and certainly and importantly their employees. So I think those are the hallmarks of thriving companies today.
You mentioned in your teachings at Duke, you talked about a social contract. Do you see the social contract changing?
Yeah, I do. I think we've seen a real dissipation of the social contract. You can witness that in those who choose to wear and not wear masks. And that's a breakdown in the social contract when you can't take the courtesy and respect for another who may be vulnerable to protect them and yourself. I mean, that's a breakdown. And in this breakdown of social contracts, I think there is a ever widening gap and a need for business to move into and form a social contract. Traditionally, we've thought about businesses as being apart from society. And over the last 20 years, we've seen a rapid acceleration moving business into the center of society. Even to the extent where companies start to take positions on important topics of the day. Now, this is fraught with all sorts of, we could spend an hour on that issue alone, dilemmas for the CEO, for the board. but businesses are being pulled into society, and that is a good thing, because businesses obviously are the greatest force on earth today. There is no more powerful force on earth than business. So if we're going to go and solve the crises we face, like climate crisis, leadership has to come from business, and business needs to rewrite its social contract. And by that, I mean, we need to not serve just shareholders, but all stakeholders, back to multi-stakeholder practice. Friedman is dead, right? The B Corp is alive and well. So benefit corps really think about interdependence. They think about the triple bottom line. They think about business as a force for good. And so, gone are the days where businesses could internalize all the profit and externalize all the cost of pollution and impact on communities and others. We now need to take full account of that. And we're seeing more and more companies today rewrite their social contract to think about multi-stakeholderism, to really reinforce this notion of the triple bottom line. And we're seeing a whole generation of people now, Gen Y, Gen Z, who want to work for purpose-led companies that believe that they have a responsibility for and to the community around them.
It's there's so much there, John. I want to do. I'd like to react, and I'd like to also drill down a little, because it's very en vogue. I do it to pile it on to Friedman, but what he said was within the rule of the law, and what he was assuming there was that consumers play two roles. As a consumer, they would gyrate to whatever the added value for them, and that was the competitive system. And as a citizen, they would vote into power those legislators that applied and imposed values onto companies, and that didn't happen. So what we have now, indeed, is a lack in trust in government, because companies just kept going, and a dead tree is worth more than a live tree, as Paul Pullman says, because no one was charged for the tree or for the pollution they created, because lobbying or just a lack of action on the legislators' part didn't play that role. But can you bring it alive? You see so many companies. I'm sure there's ones that you respect and that you see taking the step first. You've been involved in some of them. How do companies sharpen their social contracts? How do they step up to take a bigger role? Can you give an example?
Yeah, I'd love to. And back to Friedman and rule of law. It's interesting because Friedman was a literalist, and so you think about rule of law as the written law or the visible law. What about the unwritten law, the invisible law? That invisible law is the social contract. And Friedman didn't give a fuck about the social contract. So, good riddance. We are making visible, we are making manifest that invisible law. And the social contract is becoming enforced by consumers. Consumers are demanding change from companies, and they're doing it with their wallets. And 80% of Gen Y consumers today will direct their purchases towards companies that serve a higher purpose, that serve the community around them. That's the force of a movement, and therefore those that have only lived by the rule of visible law rather than invisible law, those companies are in peril. So what have I seen? I mean, we've seen a massive movement called the B Corp movement. It takes many forms. You can call it, conscious capitalism. You can call it whatever form you want, but it's a global movement now. It was founded by early movers like Patagonia and Seventh Generation, and it's grown to, over 5,000 companies today. And there are so many of them that are just really making manifest this social contract. Patagonia exists to solve the environmental crisis. That's their mission. That's their purpose. How clear and compelling is that? And they've brought that to life in their actions over decades. We see companies like Ben and Jerry's that are just using their voice to go to war on behalf of those who are most marginalized and who need it most. You can see emerging companies today. I work with a company called Grove Collaborative, which is an online marketplace of better for you products. And their mission is to eradicate plastic waste. And so they are really revolutionizing how consumer products are made and sold to eliminate plastic waste, which is an incredible threat. So I'm seeing that across the board from not only a handful, but now thousands of companies. And it makes me really optimistic that we're on to something new, a new way of leading, a new way of working. And what's great about this is those companies are growing faster and they're creating more value than non-purpose-led companies. There have been countless numbers of studies done on this, including work at Harvard Business School. And one of the great strategy professors there is a guy named Michael Porter, and he said, not all profit is created equal. Profit with purpose it yields greater return. So, it's great to see, even in the bastion of capitalism like Harvard Business School, they've come about to teach a new way of thinking and training tomorrow's leaders with social capitalism at the core.
So I see companies stepping up. I see that being rewarded by consumers. If we take the investor perspective, the argument so long has been, but my investors want a short-term return. And of course, with the BlackRock letter to all CEOs saying, as an institutional investor, no, I want to hear how you're creating value for all stakeholders. Yeah. Something really changed. At least it was meant to change. Can you give me your perspective of what really has changed?
Yeah, I would say we haven't moved as far on that front as we need to, Mark. The markets are still too focused on short-term behavior. It is really hard for public companies to be able to break that chain of short-termism. And so I think we're seeing change move much more rapidly in privately held organizations. Yeah. And we're seeing more capital move there. The trillions of dollars now have moved into impact capital. Investors who are thinking about long-term, about positive impact, not just about profits, and shifting from profit focus to value creation. And that's where the sea change is occurring. So underneath kind of the surface of the water, which is, most people look at public companies that way. Underneath that level, there is a massive and accelerating change occurring. And it's been driven in large part by the access to capital markets that have become much more focused on, triple bottom line. And so I do find that encouraging because, as they say in any kind of investigation, follow the money. And we can see the money is flowing towards, longer term patient capital, impact and value oriented performance.
And is that, because that's incredibly optimistic to hear, the concept of a CEO that wants to do the right thing being held hostage by some spotty-faced 25-year-old on Wall Street that is trying to make a quick buck is just too disgusting to discuss. But it was the reality for so often. Is this shift fundamental? Is it unstoppable? Where are we on that shift towards more impact investing?
Yeah, and it takes amazing courage for CEOs to stand up and actually fight, short-termism in public market environments. You mentioned Paul Pullman has done it and tossed that baton to Alan Jope, and Alan continues to fight that fight. There have been others who have marched down that path, but there aren't enough of those courageous warriors yet in public markets. because the pressure is just so insidious. But what gives me hope and optimism goes back to the consumer, and it goes back to the youngest generations who really see the world differently, who have a different value set, who are really much more interconnected, and who are thinking about their futures on this shared planet. And so I look at my own daughters and their behaviors and their friends. This conscious consumerism is on the rise. And so I think that will be a force that is immutable. And more capital is now flowing. And I think that tide is going to continue to come in for the foreseeable decades. I just go back to the fundamental idea that purpose-led companies return better value to shareholders over the long term. And so that's another, absolute manifestation of why this is a long-term movement and there's no going back. I don't know when the public markets will catch up, though. I do not know. That one is, it will come one day, but it may not be, anytime soon.
Well, actually, I want to use this as a segue into a topic that I always want to discuss, because a lot of the people listening today aren't just leaders, they're marketing leaders, they're CMOs. And I think you just unlocked the area of why marketing will be so important, and already is. Because another great concept that's required is information, is perfect information. And I got in my mail this morning a mail from one of my colleagues, Mark Murray, analyzing Shine fashion from China, which is nice, hip, and shiny, and at an abominable cost to society and the environment. And no one knows. At least many of the consumers buying those products don't know. Now, who's in the information business? That's often us. That's the marketers. So I'd love your perspective first on all of what we've just discussed. What's the role of marketing in helping this, helping drive those results, helping drive that information, helping drive that change inside the company?
Yeah. Well, you think about the collective force and voice of marketing. It's truly extraordinary. You think about, what Dove was able to do 20 years ago with the campaign for Real Beauty. We had a $400 million a year marketing budget. We knew that we had power. We put that power to work. And so more and more brands can think, not just about how do I sell more soap, but how do I use my voice to bring truth and light and create the environment that I want to see, that our business wants to see in the future. And so we as brand builders, our fundamental job is building trust. And you build trust through authenticity, through congruity, and through transparency. And so this idea that trust is built through openness is really, really fundamental. And with that comes information, right? And we're living in an age of massive information, but that information includes disinformation as well. And so we always have to side on find ourselves on the side of true information, of fact, and not of fiction. We can never mislead or breach that trust in any way, shape, or form. And so as real brand builders, and I know the folks who are listening to this are truly hold that at heart, we have incredible power at our disposal to bring truth and light and information and movement. We can move millions, hundreds of millions, billions of consumers forward. There are so many who are ready for this journey. And if we use our power, our collective voice, to bring truth and light, we will bring about positive change in this world. And that's what we can do as marketers.
So I'll never forget Jim Stengel, who I've worked with a lot over the years and has become a close friend. He used to say, we're talking 15 years ago, if someone came to present a plan and there was no clear brand purpose, he said they were lazy marketers. I'm beginning to feel that if you're driving your brand sales, but you're not also clear on which SDG you're helping promote, helping enable, you're a lazy marketer. Am I going too far, or do you think that
No,
that's how we should be thinking?
amen, brother. Right on. I think we have to understand this is the whole idea of the social contract. Businesses, brands are connected to consumers. We want to be in the midst of consumers. We want to build trust. We want to create our brands as forum for community. So if you're going to do that, how do you serve them, right? Our goal is to meet unmet needs. It's to serve others. If we really think about our brand as a service to the consumer that we are in service of, then we must think about what are the needs that they have. One way to frame that is through the UN SDGs. I think they're a great framework. I see more and more companies adopting those. But I challenge you to go even further, which is, are we being lazy by just adopting an SDG? Or do we really mean it? And do we get under the skin of that? So what tangible benefit are we going to drive and derive? I've long held the belief that, you can't live a healthy life on a sick planet. So one of the things we're here to do is to cure and remedy the planet. I'm a huge believer in the power of brands to bring about positive health and outcomes for people and planet. And so, we have to care for the planet around us. And if every company adopted their hometown and made a difference in the place that they work and reside, then we'd solve the world's problems.
Yeah, that music to my, because in so many ways we're back to the future. When in the old days, when you built a factory, you were in that town for 75 years.
Right.
You were going to take care of the drinking water because you were drinking it. You lived there. The people saw you in church. And it's with globalization, which I have been we both played big roles in global brands, and we've been part of that movement. But we've also somehow created a world where management sits in one place taking decisions about towns in a very different place. And in many ways, I think you're propagating or you're positivizing for a return to that local responsibility.
Yeah. Local responsibility is everything, and feeling a part of the community. And I see too many companies who have the right intent, but what they wind up doing is they write a check, right? They think, oh, we'll just give money. And that's a start, but that's not a finish, right? You've got to make a bigger difference. So give you an illustration, we at Burt's Bees, we're all about caring for the planet. We made natural products and we wanted to care for the planet. So one of the things that bothered all of us was the amount of waste that we created. And so we set a goal to be the first zero waste to landfill manufacturing facility in the state of North Carolina. And we set a vision to do that by 2010. We did this in 2006. And we set a goal to do it by 2010. We didn't know how we were going to do it, but we knew that that was important to do. And so we set that as a goal, and we rallied everyone in the company to that end, every single person. We did things like took away trash cans. We built recycling and composting centers. We sorted all of our waste. In fact, for 2 weeks, we collected all our waste, and we laid it out on a tarp in the parking lot in front of the office. And everyone had to walk through that pile of trash with a big bucket and pick out what was theirs. And it was an eye-opening experience. And with that, the lights went on for everyone in the company when we did a dumpster dive. And they said, we're committed. And within 6 months of that moment, we were zero waste to landfill. We were the first in the state of North Carolina to achieve that distinction. Burt's Bees then went on to teach Clorox how to do that across its global footprint. I think Clorox has done that or is close to doing that. I know Paula Alexander's on, she would know for sure, but it was an amazing ripple effect. And that is about acting local. That is about taking responsibility for your everyday actions. That's not just about writing a check.
But you strike another theme there, which you mentioned, but I'd like to dig a little deeper in with the time we have. which is the marketer's role in helping change the inside of the organization, how the organization thinks. We talked a little bit about how to do this at scale. You just gave an example that I'd never heard and I think is fantastic. That's at scale. When a few hundred employees dump their trash in the car park, that's change management. That's meaningful and lasting. As marketers think about their role, often looking at a board, a leadership, a legacy board that's not diverse, that is from a different time, and stuck between consumers and younger employees that are from a very new generation. What do we do as marketing leaders to help shift companies in how they think?
Yeah, well, wonderful. You know, marketers are agents of change. That's what we are. We bring about change. We study and understand problems, and we think of novel ways to bring solutions and to communicate both the problem and the solution. And as we see problems in our organization, barriers to positive change, things that may in our organizational behavior block the core values of our brand, we need to raise our voice on those things. We need to make them manifest for the leadership team and the board. And you know, all the boards I sit on, the CMO plays a very, very prevalent role in communicating with the board, in shaping the strategy, in bringing about change. So every CMO has exposure and access to their board. I encourage you to build relationships with your board of directors. Don't just build it with your CEO, build relationships directly with your board, get to know them, spend time with them, help them understand what's going on in the organization, understand what the consumer needs, where the organization is mismatched or misaligned against the values of the brand, what stands in the way, and what change can they bring about. Every single board has a nominating governance committee where ESG and those values usually reside. And so bring that up into the ESG, into the nom-gov, and help those board of directors really understand and solve the problem. Directors don't serve on boards simply to manage the status quo. They are there to bring about positive change and advance the best outcome for the organization and for all stakeholders. I do believe that. And you know, it's our responsibility as marketers, as agents of change, as dealers in hope, to inform, to coax, invite, cajole our boards to bring about the systemic change from the top that we need to see.
Sure, John. I'm going to, it's not even devil's advocate. I'm going to play back what I hear so often in our weekly sessions with CMOs, other growth leaders. I think 80% of them would have the ambition to expand their remit to say, my stakeholders are the CEO, the head of HR, the head of CSR, our investor relation team, the board of directors. But it just keeps piling on. I've got too much. No one thinks the expectations of the CMO today without any of that were realistic. So how do you go about prioritizing that?
Yeah. Well, and what we're seeing as a result of that incredible burden, because the CMO role is heavily burdened, we're seeing massive turnover. And I think that I don't have a simple solution, Mark. The world has certainly gotten more complex. The role of the CMO is more dynamic than it's ever been. I think what you have to do to really survive over the long run and thrive in that role is to build stakeholder alliances, is to really get alignment in what the core deliverables are and build stakeholder alignment to that. So that means alignment with the board, with your leadership team, with your CEO, so that you have the time and the space to build, something that is truly enduring. Campaigns take time, right? Campaigns are not built and delivered overnight. They take time. Building brand trust takes time. So whether you're new to the role or been in it for a while, I think that notion of building stakeholder alignment against the long-term goals and creating space to be patient for your practice is really, really important.
Well, if I can paraphrase,
Yeah.
Spencer Stewart is one of our partners, and we have a presentation about the Da Vinci Growth Leader, which is the profile we developed with Spencer. And one of the sort of entry slides there is a highway, a bridge that's built like this. The two sides are coming together and they don't match.
Yeah.
And the lack of alignment being number one. What I think you're saying is, look, you can do all these things as long as you have created the alignment with those people that decide whether you're there longer or not, that this is important. So focus there first, create the remit, help understand that this is of strategic importance to the company and will drive long-term growth so that you can actually develop those campaigns that take time. Is that what you're saying?
Well said. Yep, exactly right. Set and manage expectations. Define what is strategic priority. Define what's out of scope.
Yeah.
Not enough of us spend enough time thinking about what's out of scope and building alignment around these things that will not get done. We can't do it all.
Let's end. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. We have 10 minutes, and I really would like to focus the last on the leaders themselves, the people themselves. You get investment opportunities presented to you every minute of the day now, I assume, and you look at these leaders and there's a thought process there. As these leaders are trying to learn from your trajectory, your progression through your career, but also from your perspective as an investor, what is it they need to be thinking about how they maintain their own well-being and the role that they play to the team and to the company?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. The businesses we look at three things in particular. We look for purpose. And in that, that's the clarity and the consistency of the values and how deeply they're set. We look at product. We're product mavens. And, is the product distinctive? Does it deliver? Does it resonate on a technical, functional, and emotional basis? And then at the people, are there people on the team who have the range of skills and capabilities to thrive? Do they collaborate and work together? Is there a growth mindset? Do they uphold the values? These are all the questions that we ask. And so, as we're growing, we have to ask ourselves, are we growing at a rate as fast as our company and the market, right? Because if we're not growing as fast, then we're falling behind. And there's a great old saying that when the pace of change outside the organization is greater than the pace of change within, the end is soon in sight. The same can be said for leaders, right? So we have to invest in our growth. Where are we finding the time and space for that growth? Do we have the support, of our CEO, of our mentors? Are we taking personal accountability for that growth? What are we doing to grow the team? Not just the team that reports to us, but the team around us. How am I helping my peers grow? Because again, we are as strong as the weakest part of any leadership organization. So if you're part of a leadership team and someone is struggling in part of that team, you have a responsibility to help lift that person up, to make that team stronger, because you can only be as strong as your team. The same goes within your organization. And the most courageous and powerful thing we can do as leaders is provide feedback. Feedback is fuel for growth, right? We need to seek feedback for ourselves, and we need to provide feedback to others. And then there's the whole dynamic of how do you care for yourself, right? And this has become more and more apparent over the last few years that self-care, whatever your practice may be, I happen to practice a lot of yoga and exercise and meditation. You have to care for yourself. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first. It's the only way you can, sustain the kind of constant whitewater of change and demand on us each and every day. So I think it starts there when I think about people in leadership and that growth mindset.
If I bring it closer to home, thank you for that. You said you hadn't traveled much during COVID or not at all abroad, but you've been part of very global organizations. You've seen how the English or the Dutch, the Germans, how they've evolved in their management thinking, in their leadership thinking. What's the specific challenge for American leaders today, would you say?
I think it is. I would say that it's. I hate to generalize, but I think it is. We have to strip back this veneer that we need to present ourselves as some stereotypical leader. It's what we may imagine the ideal CMO looks like. No, we need to put ourselves in that role. We need to define what success for each of us individually looks like. We need to take ownership of that role and strip away the veneer and try to be something or someone we're not. Too often we define ourselves by what others expect to see of us rather than what we expect of ourselves.
You know, I have a presentation about the impacts of COVID. We made it together with the IRG 100 members. And we start with that slide of that. Do you remember that BBC interview with an executive in Hong Kong that was trying to give an interview, and his kids and his wife came cascading into the room? That was reality. And I think for many leaders still, the reality of how it should be. And now I don't think there's anyone that doesn't know the kids of their colleagues anymore, or the cat that walks across. Right. So never waste a crisis, right? What an opportunity. If there is one silver lining to this disaster, to humanity, it's that we can drop the veneer, as you said, pull back the veneer.
Yeah.
I want to.
That's why I chose not to wear pants during our interview today, Mark. Just kidding.
I know you're in an Admiral's lounge, so you would be arrested. So
yeah.
Listen, let's end there with one last question, if I may. Actually, I have two. One is to everyone here, make it really personal. If there's one thing you wish you'd known 10 years ago, what is it?
Wish I'd known. You know, I would have held on to my Tesla stock. I think it is. I have this realization at 56 that the road in the race is a lot longer than I thought, and you have to pace yourself. I was a guy in a hurry, you know, and that's great. I had drive. I'm reading a book right now, all about what it means. It's from strength to strength, and it's finding success, happiness, and deep purpose in the second half of life. And what's tough for guys, you know, people wired like I am, is we define ourselves very much by, you know, success. And I'm learning to value other things. And so it's really important, you know, to define success broadly in your life, because we're going to have success on so many different dimensions. One of my greatest successes is my marriage, my relationship, raising my kids. And so it is about, I defined success more narrowly 10 years ago than I do today. And what you don't want to do is wake up one day and find that you're not happy because you've defined success too narrowly. So think about the abundance of life. Define life goals much more broadly than your work. I think that's the important thing. What are the relationships you're forming every day? How are you having a positive impact on people? Are you leaving a legacy, a lasting legacy in the organizations you work with? I mean, be broad, be bold, think and dream deeply about what success is in your life. And I think you'll have more happiness. And I'm working on that myself.
I think it's the profound words, John. And I think you're speaking to a lot of colleagues that are in the same age period. But they're actually questions that you wish you'd known 10 years ago, you thought about. I want to thank you for your wisdom, your experience and your generosity in sharing this with this group. We are a community that's transitioning into a movement. We are marketers that are recognizing our responsibility. And more, we are seeing the fruits of others' success and bringing together the courage to step up. Your story, I'm sure, inspires many. And I want to thank you for sharing everything you have today.
Thank you, Mark. It was great to spend time with you, and want to thank everyone who joined us today too. It was a pleasure to be with you all, and hopefully a few words resonated with a few folks.
I know they did. And to everyone around the world, I want to say thank you for joining us. And I want to just quickly tell you that our next conversation is in preparation for an important meeting in a weekend before Cannes, when we're bringing together some 150 marketing leaders. And Philip Thomas, the leader of the Cannes conference event, and I will be talking about the importance of creativity in unlocking all of everything we've discussed today. So to you, and especially to John, I say thank you and all the very best. Have a fantastic weekend. Bye-bye.
Cheers.